Let's get into it. This is a surprising episode. I got to get this one done quick because I have a good feeling Rogan is going to take this episode down. It was an episode with his friend Josh Dublin, I believe, and Sheldon Johnson. Now, Josh always brings on people who are convicted wrongfully, who spend like 20 years in jail and they didn't do it, and Josh helps them prove that they didn't do it and gets them released, and it's always a touching story. Every time he's on, it's such a touching story. This time, when I was watching it, I was really put off because I've met some career criminals in my life, and I was like, this guy doesn't seem like he should be on this show. And man, was I right. Man, was I right. This is wild. So I have some clips for you. Basically, we're just going through Sheldon Johnson, what he did, just convicted for murder. We're going to get more into that story after we show you the clips. Now, I'm going to start off with the beginning. It's all Rogan stuff. They preface it with race right away. Then they get into Sheldon just kind of making excuses for the reason that he is the way he is and serving the time and being a criminal. And hey, listen, and I know this sounds bad as I'm going through this and saying that someone's making excuses. I've been a criminal before. I've done illegal things and I knew it was wrong and I cleaned myself up. Like I've righted my wrongs fully, made sure to. Like you have to be a better man. You can't be a grown man still running the streets. I left that stuff back in my teenage life, for God's sakes. So he's just making a lot of excuses. Then another clip of him just talking more about it. Then he gets into what he actually did. And that's what made me go, oh, this guy needed to be in jail, obviously. I'm going to let you decide, though. Let's get into it. Don't forget about IamCoachColin.com. We got sold not for sale stuff, all sorts sold not for sale. And we have our newest design, Cancel Hollywood, Stop Worshiping Celebrities, Public Enemy #1. There's all sorts of good stuff. Discount code is IamCoachColin, all capital letters, all one word, 1 L in the name, Colin. Let's get started.
We know you're working on some stuff with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. We have this case that is sort of hit a snag. I want you to take a look at it and see if you could help us. And I called Barbara back and said, I think that there's a mistake here because it says that he was sentenced to 50 years. I mean, that's no bullshit. I could not believe what I was reading. And then I read about what Sheldon had accomplished while in prison. And then his earliest date of release was, I think, 2049. And he had already served 25 years. So I was just blown away by the level of accomplishment and the mental wherewithal that he possessed to accomplish what he did while incarcerated. And then the path he's taken in the 8 months since he's been out is, we talk about on these episodes, how do you make change happen? He's living it and making it happen. So I thought it would be just fascinating to go through, like I said, his life, how he got to where he was, why he got this, what his thoughts are and our thoughts are on the sentence he received, why that happens too often to people of color. And I know there's one thing I want to say, and then I'm going to shut up and really let Sheldon talk and you talk. I get this a lot. Why are you always bringing up race when you talk about the system? And my response to that is, if you don't talk about how it impacts the system, even for people that have been found guilty, it's like having a conversation about President Biden and ignoring the very obvious, apparent cognitive deficiencies he has. It would be like talking about Donald Trump and not recognizing that he seems like an unhinged lunatic. It would be like talking.
Oh, and you better believe that's where I got rubbed the wrong way. I always tell you guys my biases. When I heard that, I was like, oh, this guy's a liberal. Now, which obviously he is. I mean, he's fighting for reform. I mean, still a great guy. But when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay, I can kind of see what kind of guy this guy is. But wild stuff. Let's move on. I'm going to go to another clip. So that's just him prefacing it. Why do you always talk about race when we're talking about... I can't wait for you guys to hear the rest of this. There's one thing that Sheldon himself mentions. Man, it's just... I don't want to seem... So many times I get called out as like someone who's like, oh, you're just like Candace Owens, or you're some self-hating black person, you don't like black people, you don't like black women, blah blah blah. And it's like, it's so far from the truth. Just when I look at men, white or black, and they're not operating with integrity, it rubs me the wrong way, because it took me a long time to figure out what integrity meant, to operate with it. I had a father that didn't have much of it when it came to, taking care of his responsibilities of multiple kids, and not just me. There's a brother and there's sisters and there's all sorts of kids that he has, and he didn't take care of them. So when I see it, I know what the impact could be. You hear my baby? Can you hear my baby in the background? It's my baby. I'm taking care of my baby. You know what I mean? You got to operate with integrity. Now, let's move on to the next clip. Let me make sure I can hit it here for you guys. Boom. I think I just got it. 1, 2, 3. This should be it. Let's go. This is Sheldon talking a little bit about his experience as a just straight victim mentality, I got to say.
My mother's also white. My grandmother came to America in 1918 from a boat from Sicily. My father is Nigerian. He's African. So there was always this contrast where, I wasn't really sure where I belonged at. Kids are cruel. So growing up, kids would say, oh, you're a mulatto, you're a half-breed, and, oh, you're adopted. And for a long time, I kind of suffered as a child with an identity crisis, not really knowing where I fell at on either side, what my identity was, who I was supposed to be. And my father, I'm also a product of intergenerational incarceration. My father was incarcerated when I was young at an early age. He did about 15 years. I was incarcerated. My grandfather was incarcerated. My great-grandfather was a slave. And my son killed somebody when he was 12 years old. So that there's this cycle of incarceration based on the conditions, the social conditions, and where I come from. I grew up in New York City, Harlem, on the borderline between the east side and the west side on Fifth Avenue. You hear Fifth Avenue, you're like, oh, wow, you live in a nice place. Okay. Crack era Harlem, 80s, 90s. And I grew up, protecting my mother, interpreting for my mother. My mother could hardly ever keep a job because of her handicap. There was always somebody that would replace her. A lot of people saw my mother as a victim. She was a white woman on 112th Street and Lenox Avenue, an all-black community. So as a child, I grew up protecting my mother. So I feel like in hindsight, I didn't really have an opportunity to be a child. I had to grow up and be a man early in my life in order to be able to protect my mother. And a lot of people didn't even know that I could hear. So there were times where I would be standing there with my mother, and like people would just be making all type of random comments and just disrespectful, just hateful stuff. And I would sit there as a kid, just kind of like looking up, like, dude, I can like hear you.
Intergenerational incarceration, and then goes to the great grandfather being a slave. I have to say, when you see this. Like, I had a dad. He was, he wasn't diagnosed or anything, but he drank a lot. And I often will say he was an alcoholic, and I can spot that type of thing pretty well. And because of that, I didn't drink. This guy has the same thing. Long line of people. And believe me, I have a long line of like all sorts of stuff in my family tree. This guy has a long line of people getting incarcerated. And instead of being like, it stops here with me, and it never touches my children. Instead of saying that, it's just like, well, great grandfather was a slave. Well, like, what are you talking? How are you connecting you going to jail to your great grandfather being a slave? You know how many black people connect whatever, because most of them don't even know their ancestors that were slaves. But you know what they connect that to? Becoming the best possible person they could be. There's so many that have that. I made sure I have not drank since I was early 20s. Damn, thinking about how old I am. It's almost been 20 years since I had a drink. Like I'm never doing it again. You know what I mean? I had a weed addiction. I was like, well, no, that's still like my dad a little bit. Can't do that. I quit. I'm never doing it again. I'm done. That's it. I'm like 2 years sober now. Like, come on, man. You're gonna intergenerational incarceration? I don't know the guy, okay? But your son killed somebody. I'm just going to go on a limb here and say this is a string of bad fathers. This is a string of guys just not taking responsibility. And I know that seems harsh. And again, you're going to be like, oh, self-hating this and blah, blah, blah. I don't care what that sounds like. That's what it seems like to me. because I have all the excuses in the world. All the excuses. I could be wallowing in all sorts of stuff right now. And I chose not to. I chose to go the opposite route. And also, if we really want to play the liberal game and talk about privilege, you had a white mom, okay? Your mom's white. And obviously, that's just a joke. There's no privilege there, but it's just like, man, I don't know. Find some kind of reason to pull yourself up. Listen, I can go on about this forever. Let's go into the next clip here. Now, this is him. I'm just going to go straight to him actually talking about what got him incarcerated. This is wild stuff. And I got to do it quick because I know Joe's going to take this down. There's no way Joe's not going to take this down. Here, let's go on to the next clip.
He gets into a fight with this Chinese guy. And this is not to take away anything from that man's family.
Sorry, I don't usually do this. I just want to say this is him talking about his son and how his son actually ended up killing somebody.
Up and adopting these values and these morals, and you begin to take them on as part of your characteristics, and you end up making really, really bad decisions that can cost you for the rest of your life. Like my son, when he got into a fight with an Asian guy. They called him the Columbia law student killer, right? He gets into a fight with this Chinese guy. And this is not to take away anything from that man's family. And, as a man, as his father, I felt some type of way. But the guy goes into the street and gets hit by a car and he dies. But this is how fast your life can change from just one simple mistake. From one mistake. And I just feel like, a lot of times these conditions are created and there's really no alternatives. I had never been on a plane, like Josh said. Like, I never even thought about going on a plane. So I'm growing up in this community. My father's gone. My mother's, she's deaf. I ended up having a son. My son was born in 1993. And that just exacerbated the issue, right? So now I'm really, what am I going to do now? I have a son. I have someone to look at. And despite how many times I said that I was never going to be who my father was, my actions were actually setting me up to be exactly who my father was and remove me from my son's life. And I caught the gun charge that triggered the felony that it allowed them to be able to sentence me the way that they did in 1994. I also caught another case. At that time, I was what you call giving out consignment on drugs. 2 people in particular, I gave consignment to, and I ended up getting arrested for a case. And when I sent someone to go pick up the money from them, it kind of just was like, whatever, I'm not paying him. So when I came home, one guy in particular, I ran into him with his girlfriend.
Did you get that case got dismissed, right?
The gun charge?
No, the one that you were away for. You got arrested for something. Mm-hmm. You're in jail.
Yes.
These guys figure since you're in jail, fuck it, we're not going to pay him.
Yeah, I'm not going to pay him.
And then the case that you were arrested for got dismissed.
Got dismissed.
Right,
I got
acquitted. So then you come home.
So then I come home and, I need my money. I need my money. It's just me being honest. It's just me being straight. I gave you something, and we had an understanding that you were going to pay me. And when I came home, when I finally located this particular individual, he had his girlfriend with him. And this guy owed me $5,000 for some drugs that I gave him on consignment. I gave him an eighth of a kilo, which is 125 grams of cocaine. And when I saw him, he had a bunch of jewelry on. He was with his girlfriend. She had a bunch of jewelry on. I said, hey, man, where's my money at? Oh, yo, I was going to pay you. As far as I was concerned, his jewelry we was even. So I robbed him. And I took his jewelry. And his girlfriend happened to be there. And unfortunately, she got caught up in the situation. I had a bunch of young guys with me, and they robbed her as well. And he got hit in the head with a gun right here on the side of his head. And he got 2 stitches. And they gave me 25 years for that case.
Did you hit him in the head?
No. One of the guys that I was with hit him in the head. And he identified me in a photo array, unbeknownst to me. He identified me in a photo array. This guy, as far as I was concerned, he was in the streets just like I was. So
right.
I didn't really understand that, like I said, we go back to morals and values and principles and how warped they can be, right? In my mind at the time, this is a guy who I gave something to. He's living an illegal life. I'm living an illegal life. So as far as I was concerned at that time, it was fair game. In hindsight, as I moved on and I became more mature and I began to reevaluate myself, I realized how wrong that was. But that was later on. At this time, I committed the crime and I just kept moving. Another guy that I ran into, he also owed me some money. He owed me $7,000, and it kind of went along the same ways. He was selling drugs out of an auto parts store. He was a Spanish guy. I got word that this is where he was at, and he was selling drugs, and I was going to get my money. And the same circumstances kind of ensued. So, hey, what's going on? You know, reading in between the lines and outside the margins without really going into all of the details, I robbed him because he owed me $7,000.
Did he get physically hurt?
No, he didn't get touched. Got roughed up a little bit, but there was no physical harm, nothing. Going back to morals and values and principles, right? In my mind, he was fair game. He's selling drugs, I'm selling drugs, you owe me money, I came to take what you have. In that world, that was considered as permissible. These are one of the rules of something that was permissible in that world. Long story short, in December 1997, I get arrested for both cases, really for one of them, for the one with the guy and the girl. And then the other case drops with the auto parts store, the guy that I said that was selling drugs out of the auto parts store. I am in the process of going to court. I'm going back and forth to court. I'm on Rikers Island at the time. It's just crazy on Rikers Island. That's when the gangs was involved. Prior to that, a year before that, I had got involved with the gangs. I was blood. I was a gang member. This is where the cut comes from on my face. I have a bunch of stab marks from just being in those environments and being on Rikers Island and just warring with other rival gangs, mostly Latin Kings and Nietas. My final offer before trial was 23 years, which kind of blew me away because my lawyer kept telling me that my maximum sentence was 25 years if I went to trial. So in my mind, it just didn't make no sense to me. Why would I forfeit my rights to an appeal if there's only a 2-year difference? I told the judge I would take 15 years right now. I acknowledged that I had made some mistakes and I had done some things that were wrong. And I said, I'll take 15 years right now. He refused to accept my plea offer, and I went to trial, and then I ended up getting 50 years. 5-0. And
So they give you 25 for each case? Is that
25 for each case. Consecutive. And I remember like blowing trial and just not really understanding like what was being there, but not like, it was like almost surreal. And I remember when I went and got sentenced and the judge said 50 years. Now, mind you, I had a black lawyer, a black judge, and a white prosecutor. And I remember when he said 50 years, he said, he went into all of these reasons why he was sentencing me the way that he was sentencing me. There was never no they're supposed to do a report prior to your sentencing, and it's called a post-supervision interview. Pre-sentencing investigation. It's called a PSI, pre-sentencing investigation. There was never no pre-sentencing investigation. There was never no mitigating evidence presented on my behalf to, highlight why I may have made some of the decisions that I made. And he just called me a menace to society, and he gave me 50 years.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Am I wrong? I'm just Officer Tatum and Candace Owens just like molded into one right now. Am I wrong? I don't think that's wrong. I kind of think you're somehow in touch with kilos of that substance. You have a son. He's in jail. Instead of just focusing all your time on just going to the jail every day to make sure he's okay, you're robbing people at gunpoint. You're robbing more people at gunpoint because they owe you money for drugs. You are linked to people who have large amounts of drugs. You're willing to rob people at gunpoint. You're doing it multiple times. This is after you've already had gun charges and you've been to jail. And you're in jail warring with other gangs. What do you think's... And then you're like, I don't know. They didn't bring up anything of why I may have come to these decisions. Yeah, because it doesn't matter, man. It doesn't matter at that point. Why? Anyway, it doesn't matter at all. Well, I mean, Your Honor, he owed him $7,000. I mean, how else was he going to get his money? I mean, he had to keep it real, Your Honor. No, you can't say that. You can't say that to a judge. Judge is not going to accept that. Oh, you're keeping it real. Oh, I didn't realize you were keeping it real. 4 years. It doesn't work like that, man. And here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing. Sometimes, that judge said he's what? A menace to society? Sometimes. Black judge, by the way, not a white judge, not an evil white man judge. No. Black judge. Sometimes judges are right. Trump's judge, he's a little wild. Okay, he said wild things. He's an activist. He has his own agenda, thinks he can do what he wants. Sometimes judges can just look at somebody, see everything they've done, and be like, you are a menace. You need to sit for a while. And here is the proof.
Arrest after a human torso and foot were found inside a building in the Bronx.
The suspect has been identified as Sheldon Johnson, a criminal justice activist who previously served time in prison.
All right, Fox 5's Linda Schmidt live in the High Bridge section of the Bronx tonight with more on this surprising turn of events. Linda.
Yeah, certainly surprising. Well, first of all, this guy said he had turned his life around after spending most of his adult life in prison. In fact, just last year, he started working with the Queens Public Defender's Office. Well, now he is accused of shooting a man in the head in the apartment building right here behind me and then dismembering his body. 48-year-old Sheldon Johnson of Harlem is charged with murder and concealment of a human corpse. This is Johnson recently on Joe Rogan's podcast, talking about how he had turned his life around after a life of crime. He was working with troubled youth with the Queens Public Defender's Office. The shirt he is wearing says Queens Defenders.
I got into school. I got my GED. From there, I got involved in correspondence courses. I started interacting with guys who were teaching ART, aggression replacement training, and I started to begin to understand how these concepts work, what positive visualization is, deep breathing, how to remove yourself, conflict resolution.
Well, police say Johnson's life of crime apparently was not over. He is accused of shooting 44-year-old Colin Small in the head in Small's sixth-floor apartment on Summit Avenue and then dismembering his body. Detectives combing over potential evidence again today. Inside the apartment in the High Bridge section of the Bronx, a law enforcement source telling me they found a man's torso and foot in a plastic storage bin. Investigators also found the victim's head, legs, and arms in Johnson's freezer in his apartment building in Harlem. The superintendent of the victim's apartment building saying a neighbor heard gunshots, and surveillance video tells the story.
The tenant of the apartment, he came in, he never came out. So I called police because it's suspicious.
The super providing me with these surveillance pictures inside the building that allegedly show Johnson carrying bags in and out of the apartment building the day of the murder and changing his clothes several times, as well as wearing disguises. Now, today I also reached out to the Queens Public Defender's Office where Sheldon Johnson had been working, but they had no comment.
Man, this is wild. Actually, I know Joe's taking this episode down. There's no way Joe took down Chris D'Elia's episode and a host of other people who were just speaking truth. Chris D'Elia wasn't speaking truth. He did some other stuff, but there's no way he took down episodes that he's taking down, and he's not taking this one down. This is crazy. The guy chopped up someone's body and had it in his freezer. I'm telling you, man, sometimes judges get it right. Sometimes. Here's a little surveillance action of him actually wearing a blonde wig and entering the apartment building. Just cleaning up the scene, taking body parts. This is wildly morbid. Absolutely ridiculous. Just going in and out of this guy's apartment, knowing full well what he did. Just crazy. You have a son, man. That's all I can think about. You have a son. You have a kid, man. Like, just go be with your kid every day. Just go see your kid for 2 hours a day and then work out for an hour a day. And just don't. I'm telling you, man. And the fact that this guy, Josh Dubin or whatever, the fact that he brought up race at the very beginning. And then this guy goes in the fact that he had a white mom and that the judge wasn't even white. His lawyer was black. The judge was black. The prosecutor was white. Okay. But the prosecutor didn't have control over how many years he got. The judge saw something in this guy and was like, this guy needs to sit for a bit of time because he's not getting it. And he literally didn't get it. The judge actually wanted him to be longer, 2049, like they said in the episode. The judge actually wanted him to still be in jail. Josh Dubin, what he does is he fights for people and he gets them out. That's what his organization does. And it's a very good-hearted, good organization because there's a lot of people who are innocent. I mean, let's not, I'm not saying that the system's correct in everything they do. I've seen them do some wild, messed up stuff. I was assaulted by a police officer when I was a kid. I got beat up by a cop. I didn't do anything, and I actually didn't do anything. So it's like, I know the system is bad. That cop didn't even get fired. He didn't get put on leave, nothing. Like, I've seen it. I know it's bad. But sometimes the person who's standing in front of the judge is bad. Sometimes that's actually what it is. Whew. Absolutely wild, guys. Let me know in the comments section what you think about this whole thing. The guy's name's Sheldon Johnson. If you want to know more, I'll pull up that article again. Sheldon Johnson, right there. NYC Justice Advocate Sheldon Johnson, 48 years old, charged after cops find headless torso in Bronx building, where he was filmed walking around in the blonde wig like we saw. Absolutely wild. Joe Rogan, always with the incredible guests, am I right? Anyways, guys, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Other than that, I'm out.